Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creative Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you my top tips on how you can start blogging for business. Let's get started. In this episode of the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, I wanted to sit down and talk about vlogging for business because it's getting to that time of year when I think a lot of entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs are looking to start that brand, start that business that they've always wanted to, and are really starting to think about how they can make that a possibility. And with starting a brand comes a lot of marketing, and one of the most well-loved digital marketing channels is content marketing and specifically blogging. And blogging is something that I've been doing probably for the past 8 to 10 years now, kind of on and off, not only on a personal level, but as a business venture for my own businesses and also for other businesses that I've worked with either as an agency or as a full-time employee. So blogging is something that I'm really comfortable with and something that I really love, and something that I think needs to be spoken about in terms of differentiating blogging as a way to personally express yourself and blogging for your actual business. So I'm going to talk a lot about that today and how to ensure that your blog is actually serving your business well and directly generating business growth. As always, this is going to be quite a long and hopefully in-depth episode. So let's just get straight into it. The first tip that I have to share with you regarding blogging business is to focus on what your audience wants. I think there may be deviations, especially if you're using your blog as a way to share any business news and share what's going on in your business. That will be primarily more focused on what you want to communicate. But even with news style blog posts, you also need to write them with your audience in mind. You need to make sure that you have a fundamental writing style that will appeal to them. You need to make sure that you're answering any potential questions that they might have regarding the piece of news that you're announcing. It's not just about delivering content that your audience actually wants, although that is what we're going to talk about later, but it's about providing content that your audience can actually relate to as well. And later on in the episode, I'll talk about how you can actually establish a writing style and make sure that your writing really helps your audience connect with what it is that you have to say. But for now, let's actually take a look at how to create content and decide what content your audience wants. And I've already actually done a podcast episode a while back on how to actually create interesting content that your audience wants. But that looks a bit more at like the creative aspects of making content and ensuring that the content that you're creating can help your brand stand out. I think in this episode, I'm mainly talking more about the practical elements of actually choosing topics and making sure that the content you deliver is on the same level as your target audiences. So in terms of the topics, in terms of how in depth you go and things like that. So I think the first thing to kind of establish is the topics. And before you actually look at specific topics that you want to cover, you're going to want to choose content pillars. And content pillars are essentially your 3 specialist topics. I say 3 because I generally feel like any more than that, and it can start to get a bit confusing for your audience. Not to mention, it's really hard to cover such a wide spectrum of topics, especially if you're running the blog with quite a small team. So choosing 3 topics that you can really focus on and make sure that you're covering in depth is a really good way to kind of help showcase your expertise in that area. And then once you've chosen your content pillars, you'll want to look at them individually, think about how they connect, and think about the topics, like the absolute priority topics that you should be covering. And this kind of goes into things like evergreen content. So personally, if I was starting a blog again for another business, the first kind of topics that I would talk about are those evergreen fundamental topics that your target audience is always going to be searching for, because it's good for SEO. If you focus on generating that evergreen content first, making it really good, really high quality, it's as fully optimized as it possibly can be, then over time, those pieces of content will start to rank and your website will start to gain traction in search. And so your audience will be able to actually find your content. And that's the approach that I would take. But it's not only just good for SEO, it's also good for your business, because a lot of the time I will go to other websites within my niche, for example, which is digital marketing, and I will see that they've covered quite niche topics, I think, in a bid to kind of help them stand out. But at the same time, they're not actually that's helpful for the audience. I think they're mainly used as a way to try and make them seem a bit clever and a bit more out there, but they're not necessarily thinking about the actual fundamentals. And the brands that do this typically have missed out a lot of the basics of that topic. It really does depend on the business, though. I mean, if you're, say, for example, you're a B2B business and you're appealing to quite high ranking officials in a busy industry, and they have a lot of knowledge, going down that route is actually going to be very beneficial, because the people that you're appealing to, they're not going to be looking for surface level blog posts. But at the same time, I think that you can't generalize and assume that everyone that comes to your website is going to know like the basics or is going to be like very kind of well versed in that topic. You need to kind of think about, what is it that my audience actually kind of knows? What are they seeking in terms of information? And once you've kind of found the level that they're at, then you can start thinking about how in-depth your content should be and what kind of word choices you can use and stylistic choices that you can use to kind of really appeal to them. So yeah, that would be my first tip, is to really focus in on your audience in terms of the topics that they want to see, the sort of writing and the style that will appeal to them, and just to make sure that you're providing them with the best quality content without providing them with content that's just not going to appeal to them at all. Because if you write content thinking that is going to appeal to your audience, but it doesn't because you haven't done the research beforehand, then that's a lot of wasted time, because obviously writing content, it's a very time-consuming experience. So you need to really prioritize the sort of content that you want to make and put your audience at the forefront of your mind. So now that we've looked at how to start creating content with your audience in mind, let's look at next important element as far as blogging for business goes, and establishing a publication frequency. And a publication frequency, I think, is something that a lot of bloggers are quite intimidated by, because I think it's at this point when they realize that they've got to publish frequently to see any kind of success, it's then that they realize that actually blogging isn't just a simple pastime. There's quite a lot of work that is involved in making sure that your blog is running, it is always producing valuable content. So if you're new to blogging, I would recommend starting out quite small so that you don't overwhelm yourself. I'm still quite bad when it comes to my own blog. I'm good with my podcast, which is my other long form content channel. But when it comes to blogging, I find that because I enjoy it, I think that I'm less serious about actually publishing over there on a regular basis, which I know is bad. But if I was, say, for example, when I'm working with other brands, I know that a priority that I have to do every week is to write blog posts. But as you start to get into blogging and fall into it, it's a good idea to actually increase your content publication. And I have made consistent effort over the past couple of months to prioritize my blog a little bit more, just to make sure that there's fresh content on there and that I have something new to share on social media so that I can drive traffic to my website, because obviously you can recycle old content and you can share old content, but I find that newer content is more relevant and more appealing to your audience in that moment. So I try to make sure that if I'm not writing new content, I'm at least updating old content, and then I can say that this has been updated and I know that it's got a fresh spin and a fresh angle. But I'm currently trying to post once a week, and that, along with the podcast, it's a really good balance for me. But at the same time, I know in the new year I really want to start using SEO and leveraging SEO, and I feel like in order to do this, I'm going to need to boost my content frequency quite dramatically. So what I'm actually trying to do while we're in the last couple of weeks of the year and no one's really kind of starting any projects, just wrapping up a lot of things at the moment. So I've got a bit more time to think about personal projects and my website as a whole. So I've been batch creating a lot of content, and I will be focusing specifically on SEO. And again, with SEO, it's a long game, so you need to make sure that you're doing it frequently and that you're actually frequently updating your content, making sure you're getting backlinks, trying to get mentions on social media, and just kind of boosting your authority slowly so that eventually your content gets recommended, and ensuring that you're posting frequently several times a week is probably the best way to increase your chances of ranking faster. So that's going to be my approach, especially also well next year, and that's why I'm trying to generate so much content now. And that's the thing, you can batch create a lot of your content so that you've got time, got that inspiration to sit and write. I'm not saying that you should rely on inspiration, because you shouldn't, but I would recommend using that time where you're in the right headspace to generate as much content as possible. But rather than releasing all the content you've written, focus on the quality, focus on making sure that it's really good and it serves your audience, and then over time can release it so that you've got a consistent amount of content, but you're not like overwhelming your audience at the same time. I find I know there are some websites that like to publish daily or multiple times a day, and that's fine. I guess if it's something like where it's very much news related, then it makes sense to publish every day. But for like educational blogs, I'm not sure that publishing every day is a great audience. It's going to be difficult to actually try to promote that content and try to keep up the quality of content well. So I would say no more than 2 to 3 times a week for small businesses, because that way you can still increase your chance of ranking without overwhelming yourself. The last thing that I really wanted to speak about today, and the last kind of main tip, is to use effective CTAs to provoke action. And a lot of website builders are built with the idea that a lot of business owners are going to want to use CTAs across their website. So for example, HubSpot, I know that you can create like banners at the top of each page. They're either like slide-ins or floating banners that you'll see at the top, which I find are very effective because it will be the first thing that your audience sees. And the key here is to make sure that your CTA is effective, but it's not invasive. I actually personally find that when I go on a website and the first thing I see is a CTA and it just blocks out all other content, I'm immediately put off by it because I feel like it's kind of invading my space. And I guess it's hard to explain. I guess I'm just a little bit unsure, and it kind of derails my trust a little bit of that website now, because I'm thinking, okay, well, if they're just immediately going to try and sell me something, then how do I know that they're not just going to spam me with a lot of content, especially if, say, I sign up for their newsletter? How do I know that they're not just going to spam my inbox like every day, which I found a lot of creators have started doing emails on a daily basis, and I'm just not sure that that's the way forward. Personally, I would say no more than 3 times a week, again, for emails. There's nothing wrong with sending a newsletter and then a couple of promotional emails here and there, but I find that sending one every day, and sometimes even multiple times a day, is just, again, it's invasive. And one thing that I've noticed going back to the websites and CTAs on your website is that graphic designers have kind of got really smart with this. So I've noticed that, say for example, there's a lightbox. When you first land on someone's homepage, you are shown a lightbox that completely blurs the rest of the content on the page, and you can't actually see the cross to kind of go off it at first sight, because that cross, it's there, but it's very much out of your eye line. It's kind of normally in the top right hand corner, and then the cross is also normally not black, it's a white color or a lighter color so that it blends in and it's harder to spot. And I just find that just so interesting that marketers have really feel like they have to go to those extremes to get people to notice them now. But if you use CTAs effectively, way, especially throughout your blog posts, then you won't have to go through that extreme when you feel like you're invading your customers' personal space. And with people being so cautious about data and things like that, it really is important to consider how you sell and presenting your customers with value. And if they do exchange any data, then they know that they're going to get something in return. And that's how an effective CTA can really help. When it comes to CTAs for blogs, I find that it's good to kind of keep them to a minimum, just because a lot of people are going to be scrolling your blog posts anyway. They're not going to be reading it fully. They're going to be scanning it. And because of that, you need to be strategic about where you place it. So I actually find that at the bottom is normally a good place, because a lot of people will just scroll to the bottom to see the summary of the blog posts and all the key points as well. Or you could have it in the first paragraph or so. Although I like to save that as like a soft CTA. So say, for example, if I've got a podcast episode that's corresponding to that blog post, that's not really a CTA in the sense that it's getting someone to take action and interact with your business, but they're still interacting with your content. But at the end, when people reach the end to look at your content, those people will be the most engaged with whatever content it is that you've written. So you want to make sure that that specific CTA is powerful. And I find that using images in CTAs is really effective. There's nothing wrong with text-based CTAs at all. I do it sometimes, but it's so easy to just implement a button or to create a graphic on Canva that's clickable, and then that will really help people engage with the CTA. I always find that if an image is really appealing, I want to click on it even before I've actually read the copy. And then sometimes I'll go to the landing page that was the link to the graphic and then read what's actually on there. And landing pages are obviously very much geared towards conversions. So if it's a good landing page, then it will normally get me to do whatever it wants me to do. But yeah, always remember to focus on CTAs, not just in specific blog posts, but how it looks throughout the rest of your website and the way that it kind of helps users move around your website, and whether you want them to go to your newsletter or whether you want them to book a free consultation. Just think about that and be strategic with it. So yeah, that's it. That's everything that I have to share for you with this episode. I will be, as always, writing a corresponding blog post with a few more kind of bonus tips thrown in there. One thing I did want to mention is that this is the second to last podcast year. As always, if you liked this episode, please like this video on YouTube and subscribe to our channel so that you can be made aware every time we upload a new episode. Thank you for listening. Bye.